Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 27 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Thanks for joining me. This week we're talking with Ed Morrissey. You know him for his work at hotair.com and the Ed Morrissey Show. But before our interview, I wanted to share why the new Wonder Woman movie represents everything that's wrong with film culture today. Now, that sounds pretty harsh, and I don't really mean it about the film itself. Wonder Woman is a winner, and Gal Gadot better get ready for stardom. It's heading her way, assuming Hollywood gives her enough good roles to follow up this one. But what about, remember that backlash about the lack of armpit hair that Wonder Woman had in the trailer? Or the outrage over the product tie-in that identified with weight loss and body shaming? What about when critics said the film didn't hate men quite enough for their tastes? Or, before the film's release, we had reporters playing cheerleaders of the film, sight unseen. They weren't in charge with marketing for the film. They were just doing their jobs, allegedly, but they were cheering it on all the same. That's just a partial list. Remember as a teenager, I'd watch movies with my buddies and we'd check them out over and over again. We'd go to the diner afterwards and kind of break them down and have fun just dissecting them in the best of ways. Sure, it was a little bit geeky, but it was fun. And this is exactly the kind of movie that I want to see. It had a beautiful lead actress. It got some kick-butt action, super heroics, cool special effects. It's in our wheelhouse, at least it was back in my day. That's no longer our film culture. Everything has to be X-rayed to make sure it's not offensive and that it says the right things. You know, we saw this with the Lady Ghostbusters last year. It's not happening as intensely with Wonder Woman, but it's happening all the same. We saw it with the Alamo Drafthouse and the decision to have a women's-only series of screenings. That basically dragged the movie into the culture wars, and I think that was a big mistake. I'm a huge Alamo Drafthouse fan. I think they do just about everything right, and I'm really glad that they're expanding and that they do what they do with the no talking and no texting, but I thought that was a mistake. I think if a bunch of women want to get together with their girlfriends and go see Wonder Woman, well, have at it. That is perfect. That's what movie-going is all about, but that's not exactly the case, and if you had a men's-only screening, of course the outrage would be from sea to shining sea. It's just a shame that a movie like Wonder Woman, a movie that celebrates a superhero that hasn't been on the big screen, and that's just part of the blockbuster summer season, isn't just a movie. It's got to be examined. It's got to be raked over the coals. And if it's not exactly right, it's got to be condemned in certain circles. The bottom line is a movie, it's very good, it's very funny. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine have wonderful chemistry. Check it out for all those reasons. But you know what? This culture war stuff involving movies, it's only just begun.
I am Groot, and you are listening to my daddy's podcast.
Thanks, Ben. This week's hip tip of the week is The Godfather. Now, I know that's probably the most obvious pick I could possibly recommend. And with this tip, I typically go for stuff you haven't heard of before, stuff flying under the radar. But you know what? I wanted to include Godfather all the same for a couple of reasons. For one, the film is back in theaters June 4th and June 7th. And if you missed those screenings, there's a new Blu-ray release out just now. So you can catch up on that great movie. Now, what's amazing about the film, to me, is its simplicity. Great dialogue, star-making performances, an all-American story of greed, loyalty, and family. And of course, lots of violence. Yet that combination just seems so rare to get right these days. You know, seeing Al Pacino reminds you why we're still captivated by him so many years later, despite amazing misfires like 88 Minutes. I can't stop hating that movie. But you know what? That's okay because he's Pacino. He's a movie star. I feel like the younger stars today don't quite have that charisma, don't have that snap, don't have that polish. And watching The Godfather again reminds me, hey, it's still possible, it still happens, and movie stars can be born. Now, of course, there's a million reasons why people love The Godfather. One of them is the classic lines. There's almost too many to mention. So if you get a chance, if you catch The Godfather on the big screen, on Blu-ray, maybe just kind of dig it out of your own home video collection, Share with me what your favorite Godfather moment is. Let me know on Twitter. I'm at Hollywood in Toto, and you can hashtag it Godfather Moment.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
You will believe a man can fly.
That's right. I'm getting too old for this.
Get to the chopper if you feel lucky, punks.
Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof.
Yo, Adrian.
Hey, we're covering all these franchises and more over here on iTunes at the Franchise Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Ehrenberg.
And I'm your host, Henry Papali, and check us out, folks.
What's your favorite scary movie? Probably being covered. All right. Take the red pill.
Now let's get to our interview with Ed Morrissey. Ed began blogging in the early 2000s, a lifetime ago in our cyber age. He leveraged his Captain's Quarters blog to make his name in conservative blogging circles, and for good reason. He's smart, thoughtful, and for this podcast's needs, pretty savvy about pop culture and how it ties into the modern political scene. His Ed Morrissey show airs via Facebook and HotAir.com each Tuesday and Thursday, and it's always worth your time. Here's my interview with Ed Morrissey. You've been blogging for quite a while. I want to just briefly go back to your earlier days at the Captain Quarters blog. Talk a little bit about what your intentions were at the time and maybe just sort of where you were at that point, because obviously you've evolved dramatically since then, but we all start somewhere. What was your sort of impetus for it, and what did you think that would happen?
Well, I've been reading blogs for a little bit of time by this point, and this is October of 2003. And what happened was that my wife became seriously ill, and I was doing a lot of stuff to just try to keep myself occupied. And her health wasn't all that great at the time, and so she was, tired and not really up for a whole lot of company necessarily. So I was at home a lot, and I'd been wanting to start writing. I actually wanted to do book writing at the time, but I wasn't really disciplined about sitting down and writing and exercising the craft. And after having been reading blogs really since about 9/11 or a little bit after 9/11, I thought, well, this is an interesting way of doing this, because I've always been a politics junkie. I've always been a news junkie. And I thought, well, if I can be disciplined about this, if I can start this and continue it rather than just let it drop, then maybe it's time to take a serious look at trying something again. And what happened was that I just kind of got hooked on it, and the book writing fell to the wayside, and I just really started enjoying what I was doing.
Now, obviously, one of the key metrics for bloggers today is consistency, to kind of keep at it. And do you kind of attribute that in part to your success? And what are the sort of the breaks that happened along the way that kind of magnified your voice?
Yeah, there's a few things that go into it. One is you have to do it every single day and multiple times a day, because you can't just do it when the mood strikes. This is part of the whole discipline thing. People will come back to your site if they think that they're going to see new content when they go back. And I learned that from other people who had started blogs and then just kind of let them fade off. Nobody went back if you're only posting once a week or once every other week, or 3 days in a row and then nothing for a week. People just didn't think to go back. And so I knew if I was going to make a success out of it, and success in those days was a pretty modest goal, was just to have people read my stuff, right, and link it. But the other part of it too was you have to market yourself, and you have to do it intelligently. You have to know who it is that you're trying to address with what you're writing, where you are in the marketplace. The blogosphere was a pretty small marketplace at the time, so it was a little easier to do then than it is today, I guess. But and then engage the people who are players in that market, so that you can get some synergy from that interplay. And one of the things I used to tell bloggers, I don't generally give this talk too much anymore, because you just don't see a ton of startup bloggers now. They're mostly on Facebook or social media. But one of the things I would tell people is that if you're trying to market yourself, you can't just spam people and expect people to show up and read your blog. They ignore spam. So if you want to get an Instapundit link, you have to know what Instapundit likes to write about. You have to know what he likes to link. And then you look for things that he's writing about, and if you're inclined to write something that is in some way connected to what he's writing about, then you drop him a note, him only, personally, saying, "Hey, Glenn, I saw that you linked this the other day. Here are my thoughts on this." And he might link you, he might not. It gets, Well, one thing you find out is that people who, blog get a tremendous amount of mail.
That's right.
Email, and they may not even see it necessarily. But you don't take it personally. You just keep plugging along, and you start building relationships. And that's really what happened. I built relationships with the Powerline guys, who were very, very nice, very, very helpful in mentoring me in the very first few weeks that I was doing this. And then Hugh Hewitt. I got on Hugh Hewitt's radar, and he just really supported me and supported a few of the other bloggers out here in Minnesota, and eventually got us our own radio show on the weekends out here. And but he's always been a huge mentor for me and a very, very good friend. In fact, I was just at an event with him and Dennis Prager last night. So that's those are the types of things that happen. But you have to put yourself in position to take advantage of that attention when it does come around. And so I've always thought that it's a marketplace, and you have to approach it like a marketplace. You have to market yourself intelligently. And I think one last thing that I would say is you can't be a jerk. Get your place by being a jerk. If you disagree with somebody, most of the people that I know, you could disagree with them and have a debate, and you can build a relationship on that. And I give you an example, Christian, of my co-writer at Hot Air, Jazz Shaw. We actually started off on opposite sides of the Iraq War early in our blogging days. He was at Middle Earth Journal, and there was another blog that he wrote for. I can't think of the name of it right now. And I was at Captain's Quarters, and we just basically argued all the time, and we became really good friends, arguing with each other all the time because we didn't make it personal. We argued the arguments and grew to respect each other, then really grew to like each other. So much so that his partner at Middle Earth Journal worried that I was seducing Jazz to the conservative side, and he was a little concerned about that. But I've been friends with Jazz ever since, and now we're colleagues.
It almost sounds like science fiction in today's digital age, where you're just kind of flaming each other and nasty, but good to hear all the same. Talk a little bit about the Ed Morrissey show and sort of your background as a podcaster and as a blogger. Does it all prepare you for that, or is sort of having your own show its own beast and comes with its own sort of learning lessons and sort of aha moments in a way?
Well, you've been on my show. I'd like to get you on my show more often too in the future. But we have a name for for what happens on the Ed Morrissey show. It's called Open Source Production Values. Mm-hmm. I'm my own producer, so when it gets screwed up, everybody sees it. It's out there. Uh-huh. There's nothing more honest than that, and it's actually kind of fun in and of itself because it's a small effort, right? And I've always kind of treated that sort of like how Johnny Carson used to treat screw-ups on the Tonight Show. Is you don't hide from them, you just make them part of the experience.
Yeah, you embrace them.
When a joke would bomb, he would try to do the golf club swing, and he basically make it a self-deprecating moment, like. Look how lousy I just was! Isn't that hilarious? And it was. He was really good at that type of humor. And so, it's not meant to be a version of The Blaze. The Blaze has really good production value. They have producers. They've got studio. I don't have any of that. This is where I'm at right now. Is my studio. This is what you see when you're watching the Ed Morrissey show. And so, it's meant to be a fun, intimate, interactive experience with viewers through the chat room, now through Facebook Live. And what it does do, though, is it really helps you with your interview skills. And I know that I'm sorry, the light just went up. Talk about open source production value. The light just my lighting just turned off for some reason. So now I'm going to have that Beatles album sort of look, where I'm half in shadow. Sorry about that. But
pop culture references are always welcome here, so you're fine.
There you go. But the idea is to expand ways in which you can communicate. And podcasting is just another form of communication that I think is really open to everybody. Now, I've been doing this, I've been doing podcasting since 2007, so it's been 10 years. I started at Blog Talk Radio when I was hired on over there, and that was mid-April of 2007. And I had my own show over there, and that was an everyday show at the time. And it was every day at Hot Air until about 3 years ago, and I tuned it down to twice a week because it was getting to be too much to try to line up guests and prepare material and all that kind of stuff. And I just decided, twice a week is sufficient for this. But I think it's the longest continuous running podcast series in the blogosphere.
Well, there you go.
So I believe. I don't know of any that's gone on longer. I don't know of any that's still going on that started prior to me doing the Ed Morrissey show over at Blog Talk Radio. So it's just another form of being able to engage your audience. And I think, I don't get a ton of viewership. I mean, I'm not going to compete with the Blaze. I'm not going to compete with, with the cable networks. I don't get that kind of viewership. But what it does do is I think it builds customer loyalty. It builds, reader and viewer loyalty. It creates more stickiness to the website. And it's enjoyable for me. I really enjoy it. And because I am a fill-in radio host on both the Salem Radio Network, which is, I work for Salem, and for Relevant Radio, which is a Catholic radio network, which doesn't compete with Salem, so they have no problem with me moonlighting over there. It's helpful to maintain those skills. It's a little different in the podcast world than it is in the radio world. You got to hit your marks, and you got to. There's a different set of skills in that, but they're similar enough to where my podcasting helps me to maintain my ability to do that sort of moonlighting.
Gotcha. I want to flash back briefly from 2003 or so to today. I'm going to guess that at the start of your blogging career, you had no idea that how heavily politics and Hollywood was sort of intertwined by 2017. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of evolution? What's going on in our culture where all of a sudden, every late night show is like a punditry class, and every sort of DNC convention is like a celebrity cocktail party? What happened? And I mean, maybe it's too big a question, but maybe it's just some related thoughts, because your expertise is more on the political side, but obviously pop culture too. What changed? What happened?
Well, a couple things. First off, I think that films especially have always been political. Mm-hmm. And I used to be an inveterate watcher of the Oscar awards, really up until about 9 or 10 years ago. And it used to drive my wife up the wall because she hates the award show. It doesn't matter what the award show is. Right. It could be the Catholic Church honors or whatever. And if you're getting up there and giving a speech after holding up a trophy, she hates the show.
Well, 3-hour shows are usually not a lot of fun. So, in her defense,
3, 4, or 5 hours, depending on.
It just feels that way. Trust me.
Oh, okay. So, so the films themselves have always been political, and television shows to some extent have been political. And I can go back to 1975, I think it was, when Vanessa Redgrave was promoting the Palestinian cause, and Patty Chayefsky followed her up and said, that's not what this night is all about. You need to, stuff it, basically, is what he told her. At least and honestly, even before that, when Marlon Brando didn't show up and sent Sasheen Littlefeather to go pick up his Oscar for him, and she gave a political speech at the Oscars. And I think that was 1970 or 1971.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always been in that realm. You've always seen that. They've always done it. What makes it more so now, I think, is that the cult of celebrity has kind of crossed over into politics. And all the same sort of prurient and, prurient, I think is probably the best word, interest that we take in celebrities has kind of crossed over into politics as well. And that's one of the reasons why I think I have always found the White House Correspondents' Dinner to be distasteful in some way. Because they got the red carpet out there, and they've got the politicians prancing around with the people who are supposed to be covering them, and they invite the celebrities, and I know it's fun for the people who are doing this, but I think it turns politics even more into entertainment. And what you end up with is a gladiatorial arena in which you just basically cheer for one side or the other and hope to see a lot of blood on the floor. And that's kind of what's happened, I think, over the last, I'd say, maybe since Reagan was in office.
Well, I think even with Obama and Trump, and this may upset some Trump fans, there's a cult of personality about both figures, frankly. And there's a group that treats them like superstars. You see the memes on Twitter. So, yeah, I mean, whether that's the result of it or that's part of it, I think you're right. It has been a sort of a cultural change.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
What do conservatives do when the pop culture is pounding them day after day? When you turn into Supergirl and they talk about the resistance, and you have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. going on with their sort of hardcore politics, I cannot watch. That's an answer, but it's certainly a pretty modest answer. Do conservatives have to kind of fire back with their own shows? I mean, I would hope they wouldn't be as clunky as that, but what are some of your thoughts or solutions?
Well, first off, I think that you do have conservatives in Hollywood who are trying to push back against that. I think that when you've seen people who try to make entertainment vehicles strictly for the purpose of promoting conservative points of view, it fails. Yeah. And it fails for the same reason that those on the left fail. I mean,
Miss Sloan.
Like Miss Sloan. That was exactly the one that I was going to cite. But also Truth. Lions for Lambs, Rendition. I mean, we can go through a whole bunch of these different things. People don't go to the movie theater, and people don't turn on the television to be lectured. And when conservatives do it, it's just as bad as when liberals do it. And, American Carol would probably be the one thing that I would cite, a very well-intentioned effort to try to make an entertainment vehicle that highlighted conservative themes, but it was really ham-handed. It just didn't work. Yeah. And it reminded us all of you have to make the story entertaining and let the themes play out for themselves. And I'll give you another really good example. I think of one that actually works is The Last Ship, which is Eric Dane and Adam Baldwin. I'm a friend of Adam Baldwin's. We've known each other for a few years, basically through the blog. He was a fan of some of the stuff I was doing, and I've gotten a chance to get to know him a little bit. I'm not going to tell you that I'm his best buddy in the world. That's not the case. But he's a very generous and gracious person, and I value his friendship enough to where I don't throw that name out an awful lot. But I say that in the context of recommending The Last Ship, because you should know that I started watching this because Adam was on the show. But it's a fun show. It highlights what I would say are not necessarily conservative political arguments, although you can make an argument maybe that, there's strong military type of thing here reflects some conservative arguments, but it talk about conservative values, honor, duty, country, that sort of thing that tend to get dismissed or ridiculed in more progressive entertainment vehicles, or they're used ironically. And that's not the case in The Last Ship. And I think that's one of the reasons why people enjoy it. And it's just a fun story. It's a fun sort of a science fiction-y / military / thriller story. And that's the reason why it works, is because it works as entertainment. And the more we see of those types of things, I think the better off we'll be. And you're starting to see, and you and I have talked about this, we're starting to see that in faith-based films. The original faith-based films could be very heavy-handed. Even if they were entertaining, they sometimes treated people with less grace than they should. And then you had The Case for Christ, which just came out earlier this year, which was a really good movie because it treated everybody as though they were children of God. Even the people who were atheists, even the people who were, more or less the antagonistic people in film were three-dimensional people who you kind of liked. You understood that, from the perspective of the film, they were wrong, but they were nice people. And really the only real antagonist in The Case for Christ is Lee Strobel, whose story they're telling here, he's the one that by far comes across the worst in this thing. And then that makes his redemption even better at the end. And so I think you're starting to see that in faith-based films, where the films themselves are just getting to be good films. Risen, I think, is actually the cream of the crop.
Yeah, I was surprised I didn't do better at the box office. That was a terrific film with a great angle, a great idea. The approach was solid, and it looked like any other film. It didn't have any sort of, the acting wasn't mediocre at all, and I think that's been one of the things that have been sort of dogging the faith-based films, but I think they're shaking that, frankly. I think almost across the board you're seeing an improvement, and it's been fun to watch as a moviegoer and someone who kind of studies the industry to see that happen, and I think it'll continue too. I have one sort of Barbara Walters-esque question, and it's not about what kind of tree you'd like to be, but if you had President Trump alone for about 10 minutes, you can kind of bend his ear, either ask him or tell him something. At this point, what would you say?
I only have 10 minutes, huh? Well, that's actually, for presidential appointments, that's actually quite a long time. I think a lot of people only get like 2 or 3 minutes.
And he's got a short attention span, so you got to know that too.
There you go. So if I had 10 minutes with the man, what I would say is that you have to craft a coherent communication strategy and stick with it. You can't do things on the fly. You can maybe do that during campaigns. He managed to make it work during the campaign for him. But as president, you can't do that. There's a difference between running a campaign. There's a difference between, I'll even go more basic than that. He is an expert at running what is essentially a family business. A developer's business. This is his family business. He's the top dog. He's the only constituent that really matters at Trump Incorporated. Government is much different, and he has to understand the difference between being the top dog on one ladder that exists and that's it, to being in charge of something where there's a lot of different competing bases for power, and where power is shared between 3 different branches of government, between 2 different political parties, and where the media is a player whether you like him or not. And so if I had 10 minutes to sit down with him, that's what I would talk about.
There you go.
And then he would totally ignore me, and that'd be okay.
That's okay. You did what you could. And Ed, before we let you go, we always ask guests of the Hollywood in Total podcast what they're watching these days, what they're binging on, maybe the book that's on their nightstand, something they're kind of checking out that's not the sort of the obvious, hey, check out The Mummy or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Anything that kind of comes to mind that you're enjoying that maybe people haven't heard of and maybe deserves a little extra love?
Well, there's a lot of things that I bounce around on, and for a while I've been addicted to the Investigation Discovery Channel. I'm not sure if anybody wants to know about that too much. But I would say if what I want to be doing, I think, is delving more back into the classics, reading the classics. Alexandre Dumas is one of my favorite writers of all time. And I just haven't had a chance to delve back into that because I'm so tied up with politics and watching the media and all of that. It makes it difficult to do some of the things that are fun. So
that's the downside. The Trump news cycle is kind of taking everyone's leisure time away. So
it really is. At 5 o'clock Central Time, it's like all hell breaks loose, and you got to be glued to the monitor. And I mean, I'm hoping that actually dies down just a little bit. It'd be kind of nice if it calmed down.
Excellent. Well, before we let you go then, let's let you plug away, as Martin Short used to say in character. Where can we find all things about Ed Morrissey?
Well, you can start at hotair.com, and that's really the best place to go. And if you want to read my book, it's Going Red. That's not really in the bookstores any longer, but you can order it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There's an audio version. I did the audio version myself. So if you like that, there's ebooks available both at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. You can find all the links for that at goingredbook.com. So I would say hotair.com, goingredbook.com. I'm also a columnist at The Week and at the Fiscal Times.
Excellent. Well, we'll have all this information and the links on the show notes page. Find that at hollywoodintoto.com/Ed-Morrissey. It's all going to be there. Ed, thank you so much. I love your stuff, and hopefully we can check in down the road.
Thanks, Christian.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out hollywoodintoto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at hollywoodintoto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.